So just hold on tight and let's go ahead and learn from Joseph how he built the disruptive homepage.
Great. Okay, cool. Let me share my screen.
Hmm.
You might see me and Nelson on there,
There you
which you
go.
will. I'm going to hide this and
All right.
then we'll start. So I'm just going to move this out of the way so it's not here.
All
Right.
right,
So
cool.
just as kind of a starting point. So a few little kind of tips and techniques that I use when it goes to building interactions. And I think this is quite important, obviously looking at the disruptive site. Now, some key things that I put in practice before I get going is, really having a clear understanding of what you're trying to achieve is really important. So, mapping out things, kind of understanding or sketching out things, finding examples or looking for reference points to really kind of inspire you as per se. So that's kind of really important, and that's kind of how I got to where I got to with the disruptive site. It was really about knowing where I was going, and if that means taking a step back, so either going into a tool like Photoshop or Sketch, that's really important. And I know Webflow is a tool that you can just jump straight into and design straight in Webflow. But I think if you really do want to achieve something that is slightly above that level, I think having a good outset from the beginning is really crucial. So jumping back into Webflow now, one thing that I'm kind of really kind of keen on, I think, going back from some of my kind of coding experiences is structure and really understanding structure. And there's a few key things that I always use quite often that have been or enabled me to be able to really create some interesting things. And that's to do with positions, floats, obviously flexbox, overflows and stuff like that. So you'll see some of these techniques being used as we start to go through. So let's get right into it. So to start off with, we will just drop in a div block, and we will call this our main hero parent. Now, something here, just to point out, another little tip. So when you're starting to build things, really kind of be aware and conscious of your class names. This is really important for when you start to build out really, really big projects. So you can keep some consistency. So there's one of the guys that did a tutorial on here. He was talking about how you can actually name your divs. So as we called this one main hero parent, and then anything inside of that would be a child and then a grandchild. Again, this just keeps consistency and rhythm with how you're building out things, and it will just help you really kind of build something out that's solid. So this is the main hero to start off with. And we're going to set this to the width of 100%. And then the height to 100%, 100 viewpoint height. We're also going to set this to position relative, and that point we are fine. And what we got to look at here is we've got 4 columns. So we're going to drop in one div. We're going to call this column child. We'll call it cold child. And then what we're going to do is go back to our main hero parent. We're going to select that to flex. And as we can see, we've got the first col here, but what we want to do is we want to make sure that this expands and grow. And then all we need to do is just Apple C, Apple V to copy once, twice, and 3 times. So now we have our 4 columns, which is great. Now we've got to look at how we do these lines. So simplest way to do this line is let's just make sure that these are all set on position relative, because what we're going to do now is we are going to drop another div inside. We're going to grab this div here and we're going to call this, border line. And then we want to set the width to 1 pixel. And then we're going to set the height to 100%. And at the moment, this is over on the left-hand side. So what we need to do now is, again, going back to what I said about positioning, let's just select this to absolute, and let's then float this to the right. So now we've got our borderline on that side. We also want to go in and we want to change the background color of this. Let's just have a quick look to make sure. There we go. So we've got our first borderline, which is good. And then what we want to do is we just want to go Apple C, Apple V, Apple C, Apple V, go back again. Let's just check. I've accidentally copied one more. So let me just go in here, copy that again, and drop that into the other one. And now we should have the 4 lines, which is good. So we're getting there quite quickly. So we now have 4 lines. And then what we need to do is we need to look at these 2 divs here. So these are the important divs really, and this is how we really create this effect. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give this a combo class of left, and I'm just going to put hidden, and this will just help you understand why. So we're going to call this left hidden, and what we're going to do is we're going to set this overflow to hidden, and then we're going to go here, and we're going to call this right hidden, and again we're going to set the overflow to hidden. So that is quite important, and when we start to drop in our first image, which is this part, as we can see, it's not looking too good and it's not in the right position, as we can see. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that this sits always in the center of that box. So what we're going to use, again, our trusty little friend Flexbox. I'm going to make sure that this goes into the center, and then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure it justify to the right. And then all we're going to do here is probably just play around with the sizing a little bit, get it a little bit better, make sure it's sitting right. And again, we're going to get the right side image, and I'll set it on that. We will again resize it. And again, what we will do here is we'll just set it on flex. It's justified on the left to this side, which is fine. And then all we're going to do here is probably just play around with the size a little bit, which is good. So what we need to do now is we need to actually give these images a class. So we're going to call this left side img because it's an image 1. And the reason I'm calling it 1 is because we're going to have multiples of these images in. Now, again, as another little tip when it comes to building out really complex animations, obviously you can select it by element, but depending on what you're animating and how you're animating, sometimes it's good to be able to, animate by a specific element. So that's why sometimes it's good to, class these up by different class names. So then when you go into selecting certain things, you can actually really pick them out. And now we're going to call this right side EMG 1. And then what we can do now is we can start to play around with the position of this, because this image needs to come up a little bit. So we will move it up a bit, just have a little check. It's kind of about right. If we go back and have a look at the example, this one looks a little bit bigger, so I'll just make it a tiny bit bigger. Let's go a little bit bigger, and again, just have to make this a touch bigger, and I'll probably just pull it up a tiny bit more, and we've got our first image in here, which is working fine. So now on to the next bit, which is looking at this shape. Now, the way we're going to get this shape to work, because what we've got to understand here is these are our hover sections, and there's something that we're applying to this to create CSS blend modes. Now, I'll show you how we input that and how that works. But what we need to do is we need to think about the layer. So what we've got here is the main hero parent. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create another div here. And this is going to be a background div to this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to call this, I would call this probably, let's just call this content again, parent, because it is the main parent of that. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to set it to 100% width and 100% viewpoint height. And you're like, oh, what's happened? That's actually pushed that content down. And again, this is where it comes to working out positions. And we're going to get back into the position, and we're going to change this to absolute. Boom. Our content is now back where it should be. And what we need to do again here is just check the Z index of this, and what I would probably do is just drop this to 0. So it's actually behind this content. And the reason this is so we can activate the hovers, because these are the main areas that we're going to be hovering with. So if that layer was actually above this, we wouldn't be able to hover the individual sections. And that is key to understanding why we had to break this down into 2 kind of layers as a saying. So now we've got that. Again, we're going to set this to flex. We're going to put it center. And what we're going to do is we're going to get our first image here, and we're going to drop it in, and we're going to go set it to HTTP, and I'll probably just bring it up a bit. And at the moment, you're probably looking at it and thinking, it looks a bit wonky. It doesn't look right. Let's just make sure. Yep. As you can see, it's clear in the center there. It's all starting to shape up quite nicely. We're building this out quite well. And again, we want to give this a name. So let's call this image X. Keep it nice and simple. This is in the middle. Now we're going to look at how we can make this blend mode before we start to get onto animations. So actually, Nelson showed me this little cool trick. So again, thanks, Nelson. He is the man that knows every little detail about Webflow. So you're always constantly learning. So, you know, again, with the embed, I didn't really know this. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop an embed in, and what we need to do is target these 2 images here to create the blend mode. Here I've got the CSS that will actually do that. So I'm going to drop this in. We're going to do style, close bracket, style, and then we're going to drop this code in. Make sure that it is the same. So let's just try. So we've changed it. So I'm going to call it image side. No, sorry, get me right. Left side image, side image 1, and right side image 1. Now, all we're doing here, just to kind of let people understand, is all we're doing is we're targeting the CSS, what we've created here. And again, goes back to the principle of really understanding what your classes are and where you're going with this. It will help you kind of target things, especially if you're starting to inject code into the page. Now, hopefully, yes, and it has worked. And now we have got that blend mode, which is basically a multiplier. So it's the same thing that you do in Photoshop. So now we've got that, we're kind of really starting to get somewhere now. And I think the next thing would be to kind of look at the buttons. And what we're going to do now is we're going to drop in a div block. Now, what I like to do, and I'm going to kind of show you an effect that I use quite often. Let's get this, and we're going to call this BTN for button, and we're going to call it parent, you would have guessed. And what we're going to do with this now...
Would this be a div block, or would it be a link block?
Yeah. I mean, you could do it as a link block, but I was going to just drop a text link in there as well.
Oh, okay. Carry on. I was just wondering.
No. I mean, let's do that. Let's do that. Sorry. So let's drop a link block in, and we're going to call this link parent. And then what we need to do with this is we are going to set this to absolute, and just make sure that we're on relative, which is good. We are. So get the link parent, and all we're going to do is we're just going to drop this to the bottom. We're going to move this to the bottom, and then what we can do now is we can drop in the text. I'll just drop the text in, and here we go. We have the text, and we'll just what we got here. So we've got yeah, and then we've got the text block in here, and then what we need to do is center align this. And then one other thing we're going to do with this link parent is, again, we're going to use overflow hidden, and that's for something later. If we get to that stage, hopefully we can, and I'll show you something that we can do with this. So we're going to get this link parent, and then all we're going to do is literally just position it, I don't know, probably say 6%. And then with the text block, let's just make it a tiny bit bigger. Again, we've got to make sure we sort the line height out, because we've set that previous div to overflow hidden. If the line height isn't the same, or it gets smaller, it will actually clip that text, and that's to do with an interaction that we might create later. And then we're going to just basically copy and paste this into the 4 panels. And now we have our 4 links. So into the interaction part. Now we're going to click our first section. So this is the first hover of this part, and we're going to go into our element. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a mouse over. And again, a little bit of housekeeping here. Make sure that you name these nicely. So when you start to build out lots of complex animations, it can really start to get confusing with what's going on. So it's kind of important that you have this in place. So we're going to call this section 1 roll over. So we've got that nice. And then what we're going to start to do is look at the first part of this. So we're going to select the left side image. And what we're going to do is we're going to move this. We want to make sure that it's set to the initial state. And all we're going to do is hide this. So now this will start to make sense to you of why we've set this to overflow hidden. And all we're doing is just hiding these elements behind these divs. Again, I've used percent here, and now this is a really nice approach if you really want to hide things completely off to the precise amount. And there's valid reasons why you would use percents instead of pixels. This is not the case for everything, and it's kind of a case of you playing around and working out what the best solution is for you. But as a rule of thumb, use percent if you're moving things around, because that will give you a true representation of where that is and how that moves off the page. And then as our end, we're going to move again, and it's pretty simple. All we're going to do is just put 0%, and now we've brought that out. Now getting into the easing options that we have here, and there is some great easing options here. There's loads and loads of really good ones. And with building out animations, it's a real case of trial and error in how you build this out. So it's not just as simple as, click it and then select a time. You've got to really play around with these, because the timing is really crucial to the easing option of what you're selecting. So really look at the timings and play around with it. Try slower, try faster, maybe try a combination, and you'll see a combination on the exit when we get there. So for this is a really nice one that I like, and it's in, out, Sorok or Sorik. And we're just going to set that to 0.6, and then let's just see how that goes. And you see that's kind of like really springs out, and it's got a nice bit of energy to it. And again, this is why it's really crucial that you guys play around with these different these different kind of animation types, because you can really change a feel of an interaction or a movement through that. And it's just a case of playing around. And then we're going to go to the right side, and we're going to go move. And you would have missed, we're going to go the opposite direction. So it's minus 100%. And then we're going to go over to the right, and we're going to select 0%. We're going to do the same. Now this is where it starts to get a little bit quicker, because we know where we're going now. We know what we're doing. Again, 0.6, test it out. Oh, we're getting there already. And it's not taking us that long. What we need to do now is, because this layer's behind, it's going to be difficult for me to select this layer. So I need to go into the layers panel. I need to get the X. I'm going to go back to the animations. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the scale. We're going to set the scale to 0. And then on the out of that, we're going to go back to scale. And it's going to be on 1. And again, we're going to keep this consistent with what we had before. So it's going to be Suruk. That's going to be 0.6. And then as we start to see, we're already getting there quite nicely. And it's coming around quite quickly. And there's one other thing now. So I'm going to do a combination of animation pools on this. So I'm actually going to do an opacity on this. And I'm going to bring the opacity down. And again, opacity on this, and we're going to do it on an ease because I quite like ease, and I think it works quite nice with, especially when you're working with opacities. We're 0.4, not as quick, and let's just see how that works. So that works. We might just slow it down a touch. And the reason I did the opacity is that when we start to change, between them, you get a slightly different movement, so it doesn't feel so static. So you get a little bit of staggering because of the opacity on this shape. It creates a really nice kind of in and out movement. So again, that's kind of working with different kind of animations. So we've got that. And what I'm going to do is just to make sure that it works. We're on, obviously we haven't done the out interaction. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go on to the out, start. We're just going to duplicate this, select, go in. We're going to change the name, make sure you change the name. And we're just going to call this roll out because we're rolling out. So these are all of our start positions. So a simple thing to remember when we're doing rollovers is all we need to do pretty much is just delete these, change all of these off to set initial state. And then what we need to do is we need to go in, we need to change the animation type to where we was originally. So we go to Ciroc, change to 0.6, and now we've got to do the opacity. So we go into opacity, change it to ease, knock it down to 5, and fingers crossed, we should be there.
Nice.
So we are pretty much there for that first interaction. And as you can see, you know, what might have seemed quite complex, actually, it's quite easy to do. And that is what is so great about Webflow. You know, some people would have been looking at that thinking, how is that done? You know, and it's just about having that direction to start off with to get to that point. And we've got there really quickly. So I think what we'll do is, should we build out the second rollover so we can kind of go through that process again?
Yeah. Let's learn.
So let's go through again. And let's have a look at what our next one is. So it's the spanner. So let's find the spanner. So we're going to drop the spanner in here. We're going to drop it down. Again, we need to resize it a touch. Let's go to the 70. I always like to work with even numbers as well. So there's a kind of a design principle that we use on big design systems, and it's called a baseline grid. And it's really kind of key and it's actually something that you've introduced, which I really like. So a baseline grid is to do with spacing metrics, and this comes down to when you're passing over to development, and it's kind of having a consistent spacing. So some people may have heard of a 4-point baseline grid or a 5-point baseline grid, and that means every element is a multiple of that. So if I'm doing padding, it's, you know, either 4 or 5 pixels, 10, 15, 20, 25. And you've actually started to introduce this here. So this is key principles of keeping consistency between design elements and how you build out elements so they feel consistent. The flow of the page feels consistent. And that's, again, a really nice principle to start thinking about when you're building out things. Get that in place, and it will bring your design forward a lot. So let's get back to where we was. So we got this left side image one, and we need to call this left side image 2. And pretty much we want to do the same thing. So we want to set this to, did I set it? Absolute. I didn't. This was done on, I believe this is done 2 seconds. I'm just regrouping on there. Okay. So yeah, that was actually done to that. And then I do believe, so I do need to set that to absolute. Now, I probably should have set this to absolute at the beginning, but it's not to worry. So we're going to do it on the number 2. And that is so that this image actually sits in the same position as the other one, because this wasn't set to absolute. Again, we should have selected that to absolute, so they all go into that space. And that's because if it's set to relative, it would be relative to the position of the element. And obviously the element which is the left side image, which is causing that other one to push out. So that is why we need to set that to absolute, and that will now fall straight into place. So we've got that, and then we want to kind of drop in our other side. Again, we'll bring this down, probably bring it, I don't know, I think it was on 70, wasn't it? So we'll go like that, and then we want to do right side ing2, and again set this to absolute, and boom, we're in there. So that's in that position. Now there may be a scenario. No, there's no scenario. That's fine. It's just me thinking out loud. So now what we can do is we probably just, again, just this position of this, because what we've got is this kind of this staggered thing, and it kind of goes to what the brand was about. It was about being disruptive, and it was about that kind of, you know, juxtaposition of elements to really make things kind of feel unawkward, but still worked really well, and it got across the message what it was trying to, you know, describe in that sense. So we've got the two images, they're now in place, and what we need to do now is, let's not forget where we went into the embed. So let's open this up, let's copy this, and let's just change that to number 2. Again, keeping that consistency, it really speeds you up later down the process. So now we've just got, and we're in, and we've changed, and we've got that sorted. So now we're going to go in and we're going to drop our next shape in, which is the square, and we're going to go into our content parent where we've got the square, and again we're like, whoa, what's going on here? I think we might need to change the position of this, change the size of this first. Again, just as a rule of thumb, this is just for example purposes, but you know, try and bring these in in you know, double resolution, so that, you know, they're retina ready when they go onto mobile screens. Again, you might come into some instances where you know, images might be really large, so always look at the file size, check the file size of the images, make sure they're not too large, and if they are too large, use a third-party kind of file compression. You know, if you're converting from PNG, just type in PNG compression, and there'll be an online tool that you can literally just dump your images in. They will compress them down, and they will make sure that your site, you know, is kind of loading up quickly. I'm sure people would have come across where they're, you know, dumping really big images into their site, and they're like, why is my site loading so slow, or things like that. So just think about the image size and do that so it works well. And again, what we've got to do here is give it a class, and I'll just call it S for square, and then you would have guessed it, absolute, and we're now in position. Again, we probably could have set the X to absolute. I don't know if I did. No, I didn't. But that's why that you need to set that to absolute, so it fits into that middle area. Again, having a play around with positions can really help you understand how you can really move elements around without using things like margins and paddings. So some people might have started to play around with them, and that's probably not best practice. And always think about position, because position really can determine where things sit on the page. Right, so going into how we get this to do the next bit, and we're going to be pretty simple. So we're going to select this next section, and then we're going to go in and we're going to create another hover, and we're going to go start animation. And because we've already built these out, what we're going to do now is we're going to duplicate this, we're going to select this, and then what we're going to start to do is retarget these images. So we're going to change target, boom, change target, boom, the image X. So again, we're going to have to change target, but we're going to have to go in here because we can't select that from that panel because we've got that other layer on top. So we need to change that. We need to change this one as well. And what we need to do is go in again. So this is, and we change that. And we should be, we need to change these as well. So let's change the target. And again, we've got to go in here and we're going to have to change them like this, because they're not poking out, and that's probably because the interaction is set on these elements. So it's bringing out the old elements from that previous animation that we've created. So again, this is where you kind of have to flick between the layers, and sometimes if you can see the elements, then bringing them elements to the front. And then we're just going to quickly change these. And change this one.
Nice.
And let's just make sure that's working. And you're thinking, oh, the other ones are still showing. What's going on? Let's just check. Right. Okay, that's cool.
Nice.
Obviously, we've done the rollover. So let's go back into that. Select this. Start animation. And we've got the out. Duplicate. Select. And then we're just going to do exactly the same. Change the target of that. Change the target of that. Change the target again. I'm just going to go in here, select the square, and again, change the target here. Square, and hopefully, there we go.
Nice.
So
simple.
We're it's exactly, and
simple.
it's simple. It's very simple.
Yeah.
No, it's you know, there is a little bit of work that, you know, took me to get there.
Yeah.
You know, over time, as you guys get to grips with, as I said, these positions, floats, flexbox, understanding overflows, it will come. And then when it starts to come, you can just start to think about something. And as long as you have that plan in front of you, you can execute it. You can really, really execute it with quite ease. So, yeah, I mean, that's where we are for this. If you want me to continue, I can show you how I put together some of the load interactions.
Yeah. Let's do a bonus tutorial on. So I notice if you go to the live site and refresh it, you do a thing where you have a couple of loading interactions. Yeah. So I think that would be cool bonus to show off how you've built those.
A Brucey bonus, as we say over here.
Brucey.
that's an English joke.
Well, anyway. Today I've learned that and spanner. I Googled it actually, and I was like, oh, so that's what you call a wrench.
Yeah, we call it a spanner. So yeah, great. Everyone's learning. Everyone's learning all sorts of things. So we're learning. It's all, all good. It's all good, people. All good. Right. So let's get into the
page
intro loading animations. Yeah. So obviously, if we look at this, we've got a few things timed here. We've got what are the lines. We've got elements revealing themselves. We've got a few other things going on here. So let's kind of get into that. What we're going to do is we're going to go back into our layers panel. We're going to start to build out these elements here. So we've got 3 elements that are in the middle. So we're going to drop the logo in straight away. Boom. Whoa, we're like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Right. We're getting a bit crazy. Try not to panic. Let's just size it first. And, you know, we could give this a class. I mean, you don't have to.
It's kind of like Bob Ross where it's kind of like Bob Ross when he starts to paint something over something and you're like, what has he done? He's ruined the painting. And the next thing you know, as he finesses it, it's like, oh, it all makes sense.
And guys, you would have guessed it again. What are we going to do? We're going to change the position, and then here again, we're straight back in the middle, and that's where we wanted to be. And we just size this out a little bit. Just have a little butchers. Looks okay. I think there may be something I need to look at, and that is if we look at what we've got going on here, we're like, this is over the top. So what we need to do is we need to look at, again, this is why we set the position. So if we just bring the Z index up to like, I don't know, 3, boom, we're now above that element, which is where we wanted to be, because before we was below. So that's great. We've got that above. We're looking good. We're on our way. So what I'm going to do here is we've got this logo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a div in here, and I'm going to put this logo inside of this div. And actually, we've done this slightly the wrong way, and forgive me on that. That was my wrongdoing. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the position of this just for the moment. So just to reset this. And then we're actually going to go back to this div. We're going to call this text hide. And the reason we're going to call this text hide is because we're going to set the overflow to hidden, and this will help us when we go to create that that reveal animation. And it's kind of one of my favorite animations. I do it quite a lot. And then we're going to set this to absolute, and then we're back in the middle. And then we've got our logo inside. So, and then what we're going to do again is we're going to create another one, which should be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just leave this, and I'm going to do just that animation there, and then I can get through this a little bit quicker because I'm just conscious that we might be taking up a bit too much time. So what we're going to do for the moment is just to show you how we get the logo to come out of that element, and again how we get these to come out of this element. So let's go into the animation. I'm going to select the body because we are on the body of that interaction. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go page trigger. I'm going to do page load. Now, there's quite an interesting thing here. And when I mentioned this to Nelson, he really liked the explanation of this. But we have when page starts loading and when page finish loading. Now, this is really, really important, especially when we start to animate lots and lots of elements. Also, we have to think about the elements that are inside of that page and how that could potentially slow down your animation. So it's really important that we do when page finish loading, because what happens is the page will load, it will load all of your assets, and then it will fire that animation, which then helps us to make sure that when it loads, the animation is not jittery. And I'm sure you've probably come across it and you're like, why is this lagging, or why is this slow? And if you start adding in video and stuff like that, it's going to get really messy. So this is really important. Make sure we do it when page finish loading. Right. So we're in, and then we want to create, and we're going to call this, let's call this home intro load. And then it's as simple as the first element that we're going to animate is this line, so border line. So we're going to start, we're going to do size, we're going to set the height. Oh, that's popped up. Go away. Go away. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. Let's just move this over here, sorry. We're going to set the height to 0%. And then we're going to set this to the start point, because that is where we want it to start. And then we're going to go in, we're going to go size, we're going to go height, we're going to go 100%. That's now going to bring that down. We're going to set this to, I'm going to go back to where he was. We're going to go our nice little Sirach. I'm going to put this to 6. I think what we're going to do is just slightly delay it. We don't want it to happen straight away. So sometimes when I'm doing page animations, I like kind of delay them before the page kind of loads, so that it gives it a little bit of time for the user to see it. Because again, if you do it straight away as it loads, it might miss, especially when we've got something, you know, really like really fine there. It's just, you could miss it quite easily.
Yeah.
So that's borderline 1. Borderline 2. We're going to do the same size. And we're going to do height 0%. We're going to go in here. We're going to do size. We're going to do height 100%. We're going to do it 2.4. We're going to slightly stagger that again.
Okay.
We're going to go into Sirach. We're going to do it Sirach, or whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to do 6 again, 0.6. We'll go here. We're going to select the size again. All right, 0%. You kind of get it now. It gets a little bit repetitive, but you know, it's pretty straightforward again. And we'll just go 100%, and we will change to Zurich, and we will change this to 6 and 6. So now we're starting to get that. Boom, boom, boom. Nice. Right, we've got them 3. That's all good. And then let's go to the logo. So while we did the text hide, we're going to grab that logo. We're going to go here. We're going to move. This is where we start to get that grasp of why we start to do overflow hidden, because if I just bring that down by 100%, it is now hidden that image, which will create our lovely reveal interaction. And again, we just go move, and we do the Zurich again. We do 6, Again, we just want to time this away. Like each one is slow millisecond away. And make sure that this is on 0%. Now, again, I did this on percent, again, because as soon as I hit 100%, you notice how it brings it exactly to the bottom of that element that we have placed it inside. And again, that is where sometimes you might want to use percent, sometimes you might not. But percent for me is always a good starting point. And then we want to go onto these elements. You would have guessed it, it's pretty much the same. We just go in, we bring this down 100%. We're going to go move, bring it up 0%. I'm going to get it on that. Change this to 1 second now, 6, and then
rinse and repeat.
And rinse and repeat. So let's just look where we are. Right, so we see that, you just see the start of that top of the image. Just the start, we're starting to see that a little bit. So, you know, easiest way would be just to drop it down a touch. You could just do that. Just do that, and then we're there. Do I need to run through? Should we just see these last ones come together so we can see it as a final piece?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah.
Let's see it finished. Let's see it through.
I'm gonna speed it up now, so I'm just gonna go through this quite quickly now. So 100%.
Yeah. While he's working, everyone go ahead and start posting any questions you have for Joseph, or any questions about Webflow, or even links to projects that you're working on. Because we're gonna go to the second half, the second part of this stream to go over your questions and review your projects. But yeah, this is it shows how easy it is to build something in Webflow, and I think that's what web design should be. The hardest part about building for the web shouldn't be the building part. It should be the concept. Thinking about a great concept, kind of like the Disrupt, where, you know, images are not aligned perfectly and they're in different shapes, or, you know, different sizes. That shows off, that reiterates the name of the brand, you know, and reiterates the logo type. And so that's what caught me. That's what caught my attention with the Disruptive Social website. It's just so nice. And then adding the interactions like Joseph did, it was super simple. But of course, to get to simple, it takes a while to get that concept just right and the animations just right. But with Webflow, you can reiterate super fast. Whoa, you're already done.
I'm done. No messing around.
1, 2, 3. There it is.
There it is. And, you know, we've created that, you know, pretty straightforwardly. You know, it didn't take too much time.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're there, man. We're there.